as I said earlier, George has been a key figure, recently also nominated and won the most influential person in the UAE area for blockchain as well. So he runs a huge networking group across mainly Middle East areas under EcoAx brand. So tonight, as I mentioned earlier, you guys are all welcome to come to that networking group as well. And these are informative, educational kind of events where people get to know and learn about this, because it's our duty to make sure people are informed. And as His Excellency also mentioned, Dubai is doing great. I think Robert also mentioned that, you know, everyone should take the time to go out and learn about it. So this is something that we all do to give back 10% of our time to do and help. George is also a co-founder of the global blockchain organization that I mentioned, and CEO of Nimbus, dare I say as well. George, go for it.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for those that are taking time from their busy schedules to be with us here today. It's a pleasure, obviously, to introduce Mru Patel. We have been colleagues for over 7 years, during which we have participated together in quite a few physical as well as online events. And obviously, it was a pleasure to also visit Romania when we organized a massive blockchain congress about, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. So time does fly. But I think it's much more important that the effort that is being put in place to actually build a substantial community. And that's, I think, one of the strengths that definitely Mru brings to the table. So
let's go for it. So between us, we have over 30 years of IT technology. So blockchain, crypto, all this, yes, the way I see it, and I've been in Sun Microsystems when .com started, well before you know, the Facebook, Google started. In fact, my ex-boss, Eric Schmidt, went and became the CEO of Google. So we were talking about decentralization, virtualization, even in those days. So now we are seeing it implemented thanks to blockchain. For today's session, what I'd like to debate out, discuss is, where do we see it going from here? Just now, there's a lot of hype with DeFi. There's a lot of hype about NFTs. And for those of you who trade, how many people trade in the audience? How many people do trading? Good 20, 30%. How many people in the DeFi space or know about it, get involved? 5, 10%. NFTs? 10, 20%. Great stuff. Any form of asset tokenization? 5, 10%. Great. Okay, so we're going to debate it to see, crystal ball gazing. You know, I've been visionary for 20, 30 years, so let's see where we go. And George as well has been at the technical end of major corporations, where it goes. So George, let's open up. We're both into the DeFi NFT space, and that video you saw was, I'm the CEO and founder of that, or chairman and founder of My Tokenized Capital as well. Recently got awarded the best tokenization asset platform at the AIBC Summit 3 months ago as the best tokenization asset platform. So it gives me a pleasure to now share with George where you think this industry will go in the next, in our, I guess, lifetime. Blockchain is 2 years, the way I see is a future, because it's moving so fast. If you say 10 years, 20 years, it's long. Where do you see 2, maybe 3 years' time?
For me, it's actually very simple and straightforward. Being in IT for about 35 years plus, both in North America, Europe, Middle East. I've been in the Middle East for 25 years, so this has kind of been my ground between here all the way up to China, and specifically every single country in the Middle East, maybe with the exception, I think, of Yemen and Afghanistan is the only two that I've not visited yet so far. Now, IT is primarily technology of digitalization. So that means it's a technology where we take something that is physical and we turn it into data or numbers that we can afterwards monetize or add extra value. One of the biggest issues that always we had with IT, having a big background in cybersecurity, is that the elements of trust and cybersecurity and IT have never built into IT itself. It has always been added as an after effect or bolted. Because trust and security was not built into IT, this has always created a problem addressing elements where value is transferred between corporations or between corporations individuals or between individuals themselves. So blockchain itself was created as a technology that allows you to transfer value and establish trust between two entities without any middle parties, where in traditional IT this is done through what we call centralized certificate or authorities. So this is itself a major, I would consider, drastic change. So that means we allow now to have things that are physical to be in numbers in computers, but at the same time with the trust established behind it. Now, do numbers by themselves have value? Well, it depends. If people give it value, then they'll accept those numbers as value and they'll use it as a potential monetary or a gold replacement. And we have this case primarily in Bitcoin today. But this is one of hundreds or thousands of use cases that are possible with blockchain. And what we have seen definitely over the last 7 years with blockchain is the birth of a whole new generation of use cases. And these use cases come from many aspects, not just from the trust aspect, but from the aspect that we can now start building a whole new generation of contracts or relationships between individuals, corporations, or entities. Let me give you an example, because usually I think examples is the best way for people to understand value that is brought. One of the I have a big background, not just in cyber and IT, but also in telecom as well. I have dealt with the largest telecom organizations in the world. The largest telecom organization in the world today has decided to use blockchain to establish its relationships between themselves and the people that provide products and services to them. So this organization, by the name of Vodafone, many of you have heard, has probably 40 opcos around the world, probably a few more, and deals with very large suppliers. Some of them I worked for, like Huawei, and they provide anything from mobile phones to cellular towers, etc. So there's a contract between themselves and the supplier. So there is a transfer of value that needs to take place. However, this is done today through paper means, which is very cost consumer in terms of to the organization. What do I mean by that? Let's assume that somebody like Vodafone orders 1,000 cellular towers and only 900 get delivered. You need to make adjustments to the contracts. The same thing about spare parts, mobile phones, and many others. So the adjustments are bigger and more costly than the original contract themselves, because these contracts may last 4 or 5 years. By implementing blockchain in the two parties having a relationship and trust, Vodafone is going to save in the neighborhood of something like $400 million in their supply chain. So this is one very simple example in which the new generation of use cases with blockchain is dramatically changing the landscape. Dubai, as an example, is doing the same thing, but it's doing the same thing at its governmental and para-governmental organizations, whether it's paying for real estate, whether it's transferring of real estate and land registries, whether it's, for example, an organ donation, which is a colleague of mine that is a project that was started by his son, and now the father has taken over this project. That's how big it has become. Now, the other parts that I think we have seen in the last certainly 2 or 3 years is, for example, the birth of what we call NFTs. Although NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, have been around for about 4 or 5 years, and CryptoKitties was probably the first one that everybody got to know, but then it disappeared for 2 or 3 years, and now it came back as artistic tokens. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, allow you to have a unique value of an asset and then specifically trade that asset between various parties. but at the same time having a smart contract. When you combine these two things together, magic happens. And what does it really mean? That really means two things. When you have, for example, a Bitcoin, two Bitcoins are always going to be the same price. That's what we call fungible. So Bitcoin A, Bitcoin B are interchangeable. When you have non-fungible, that means one coin is different than the other. So that coin represents usually an asset. That asset could be intellectual property, could be a piece of art, meaning a painting, it could be a piece of music, could be a video, content, a 3D object, and so on. So when that object gets transferred, all of a sudden, the two parties that are involved in the transfer of that intellectual property are able to exchange value between them. That really means that anytime the value of the asset increases, it is get represented and negotiated through the smart contract. The second thing that is important is the original creator of that intellectual property also gets rewarded. Maybe it gets rewarded 5 or 10% of that value. So it's like he's getting royalties for the entire life of that asset. So this is a massive change in the way artists and creators of content and intellectual property are changing. Now, is this the new NFT? Is it all there? I would say we're in the Wild West. I mean, a lot of maturity still needs to take place, but the birth of the foundation to establish these changes has been put in place. So once we have the right user-friendly applications to use these NFTs, then I think massive change is going to come.
Okay, let me try and cover where I see it coming from to where I see it going to, bringing it back to on the topic. So George has talked a little bit about the content side, the creation side, what NFT means. Again, like George, 35 odd years in tech. So if you think in the early days when the mobile phones were created, Siemens, Nokia, Motorola, I was with these companies at that innovation. Who would have thought that mobile phones would be the way we see it today? I then moved to Sun Microsystems when internet and .com started, and we were visioning what's happening today in the 90s, you know. So if you see some of the talks I've done then, we were saying exactly what's happening today. Thin clients, meaning smartphones, we used to call it Java phones in those days. Fat pipes, which is high bandwidth, so we're seeing the 5G, 6G coming on. And big server farms distributed. We are seeing cloud computing. So we talked about this 22 years ago, 25 years ago actually. 25 years ago, I remember speaking about this vision. But we also talked about distributed apps, as you see dApps happening, which is now happening. But distributed apps where companies like VMware, decentralization of even processing. I remember fighting with Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates on stage soon after winning a huge contract in UK, and we were debating out how their model is really monopolistic, because for decentralization to happen, you cannot have monopolies. You know, you can't have the big tech giants, which is what's happening just now, control the masses. So if you look at the big top 5, 6 tech giants, they are controlling where things are going. And that's why decentralization and the power to the people is happening. I was there when open source got founded, because it was our Linux software, our Solaris rather, we gave it and made it into open source. And we always had a mantra in the early 90s that no one company can have millions of people on their books. You can't afford to have that. And fighting with the Microsoft at Sun and the IBMs, you know, they had 50 to 200,000 people, and we had 50,000. And we said, how do we scale this? How do we make it big? So, you know, we said open source. And open source was the best thing that we did in the 90s, where we now got access to millions of developers, and that's when the decentralization thing started happening, remote working started happening. We had, when we created Java, I remember, you know, we used to say that, you know, let people work where they want. So in the valley, you know, people came on skateboard shorts, trainers, and work in car parks, coffee shops, and that's the way Java, the name, got founded, and doing the visionary things. Now, where do we see this movement going? So George touched on tokenization. I don't like the word NFT, by the way. 5, 7 years ago, I started doing a property-based token asset, eProperty Wealth. And I stopped it. I stopped it because the world was not ready. And just like in the early days, when the world is not ready to do what Google is doing now with Google Docs and all that, and we had Open Office and Star Office, it didn't take off because the world was not ready. So tokenization of any asset is where it's going. NFT as a word, in my view, in the next 3-5 years will be gone. It'll be tokenization of asset. So it could be real estate, it could be a yacht, it could be a helicopter, any asset that is unique. You know, George mentioned that as well. It has to be unique rather than the same, i.e. Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin versus a unique aircraft with the registration, a building with its own land registry markings. Unique thing will have a physical and a digital footprint, okay, on the blockchain to make it very unique. How many people heard of metaverse? Metaverse, yeah, 10, 20%, 10%. So a lot of people talk about metaverse being in the gaming world, which is where some of this starts. In fact, that's how digital assets started. So in the gaming world, people playing games and buying things to take them to the next level in the game, or now what's happening is even people buying land on Mars and, you know, land pieces and doing malls and rentals and all of that in the digital world. And a lot of money being spent, hence why some of the things like CryptoKitties and CryptoPunks and a lot of these are being created to make it unique, where people can trade one to the other without having the middleman through swap basis, okay? So you don't swap, you don't go on an exchange and middleman makes the money, they just swap through a decentralized exchange. Just like swapping cards, and that's why cards as well is happening. I see the world to go into a multiverse rather than a metaverse. And what we are doing on the My Tokenized Capital is taking the world to that multiverse and disrupting the whole social media. So I see the world where the average person, 99.9% of the population of the world, don't have a clue about cryptos, exchange, blockchain, and us in the tech space, we make it even more difficult. So my job is to make it a lot easier for people to understand that whole decentralization movement. So where we see this going is multiverse. You could have a building, so you could have a physical ownership through an SPV or whatever, but you could have a digital footprint on a digital multiverse platform, and you could do the same thing. Own it, rent it, share it, and things along these lines. So everyone in the ecosystem makes money. I have a mission to make an impact on 1 billion people's life. So even us watching a YouTube video, posting something on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, we don't make money by watching, yet they make money on us. We are the product, okay? We don't do anything, we don't get anything. The people who are posting it don't get anything. Now these are unique pieces, NFTs for want of better words. We post videos, photographs, whatever. We're not getting money. The Googles, the Facebooks, Instagram, they are making the money. Why don't we give every stakeholder something for being the product? And that's the mission I've got, to disrupt that in the MyTC platform. And then take it to the multiverse rather than metaverse. So even if it's a building that's tokenized, just like how you'd create an SPV, I had a real estate property investment fund 20 years ago. So I know that market very well. And the digitization of that real estate, and the same way through the blockchain to create, these are my shareholders, these are my loyal customers, and this is how I'm going to share the revenue, the profit with the loyal customers, just like you have loyalty cards, right the way through to the investors. So when your reports come out, you share your dividends, same way on the blockchain, and make it transparent. 95% of the REITs and the investment funds and the trusts are not transparent, and they take a huge slice. You can just tell from the salaries they have and the multi-story glass buildings they have where the money is going. So me as an investor, I would be upset to see them living such a fantastic life on my money. So that's what we need to disrupt, okay? So the middleman thing is the best thing that can happen from blockchain. Let's take it now and keep it short answers, okay? And hit some fireside fast questions, okay? George, in a few words, where do you see this particular NFT market with the music, the art and all that go in the future, you know, with the VR, AR, where do you see that going?
I think I see it going in which we're going to have a whole new generation of applications that are going to replace the likes of YouTube. The best example, I invite you to go look at online. There's something called Rocky.app, which is being created for DJs, where a DJ can create content for music. And every time that content is being played, the DJ will actually get their dividends for what they created. So today the model is you pay Google through ads, and maybe a small percentage of that gets to the author of the YouTube. In the future, it's going to be the author of the content gets directly paid every time the content is being used. So this is the big change.
Absolutely, and that's what I said we're doing on MyTC. We're even taking it a step further, where not only the author gets majority, we put 5% to charities, we put 5% to all the contributors to make it more viral. So, you know, people who are journalists, people who like to write about things, people who like and share and comment. So my mission is, you know, the poor people in, I'm from Africa, India, people who just do likes and share to their celebrity status people, at least even if they earn $1, they'll be able to eat. And this is where I am very passionate fighting against the big tech. So the more giving, and 80% of the money should go out. Imagine if Facebook, Google, and all these people put even 20% of their money going back. World would be a better place, and that's where we want to see it going. In terms of the future, in terms of the NFT, I also see, you know, so taking your music example, museums, something we're doing as well is, if you think of all the museums in the world, more than 80 to 90% of their art, they pay tens of millions in just storage, and it's not even on the shop floor or viewing floor for people to see. So this is dead stock sitting in the back, collecting dust and shrink wrap. How do they monetize some of this? And a lot of us like to have pieces of art or pictures or whatever in our offices, homes, wherever. So I see the world going, we are going to be renting that from museums and say, I own a piece of that, or I rent that directly from there. So imagine you owning a slice of that. And that's where I see the world, including having VR types of glasses to view it in different ways. And our friend Vesa is doing something along those lines as well.
The second topic that we are also covering in this panel or fireside chat is the asset tokenization. Yes. And I find this extremely important. The question to you would be, what do you think is today the most popular token that is being used in all blockchain? It's actually something called USDT. It's the simplest token that exists. It was created by a good friend called Brock Pierce, which actually ran for president. And it's very simple. You put a certain amount of dollars in the bank, you create a digital version of that dollar, and then you exchange only that digital version while the other one is being stayed in a safe. Now, imagine what this does for business. It accelerates business. Now I can pay for a house, I can pay for the car, I can pay for any other asset instantly, and the price will always stay constant without losing any value. Now, this is the example of USDT, but tokenization can be applied to any asset. The asset could be company shares, the asset could be real estate, the asset could be gold. The concept is always the same. You take the gold, you put it in a safe, and you issue the exact same amount of tokens that correspond with the tokens that is in the safe. That means now we exchange gold between ourselves at the speed of light, but the gold is always stays there. If it's real estate, the concept is the same. You have a building, you have the tokens that correspond to the building, we exchange fractional or a percentage of ownership of that building at the speed of light, meaning that, for example, if I have a whole building, maybe I only want to sell 2% because I need cash now. I sell the 2%, the 98% I still preserve. This changes dramatically the way we do business, whether it's company shares, cars, or real estate. So We are digitizing, and I think what is important here is not just digital assets, it's tying the digital assets to the real world. And by tying the two together, this is where we make real change. That means we can now do commercial, real trade the way we have been doing it before, but we're doing it at a much more accelerated pace. So we're accelerating at the speed at which business can be conducted.
Yeah, that's important. That's why I said I don't like the word NFTs. I like tokenization of assets. Taking it on from there, let's look at a little bit of the nasty side of this business, okay? We all know crypto has a bad name for many reasons, because there's some bad actors. There's bad actors even in traditional business. People say there's a lot of money laundering, and this is another way of doing money laundering. Yet if you see, crypto does not even do 0.0001% of all the money laundered that is happening in the world, compared to the US dollar even, forget about the other currencies. But we still need to fix, because we have a ledger-based, decentralized-based track record, and now we see a lot of proof of history-based blockchains, which is fantastic. The history of where the money's come from or where it's going to and who the owners are, etc. Where I see the problems are when tokenization, NFTs, and it's already happening, where people are copying certain pieces of art, music, whatever, maybe some slight variation, and reselling it. So how do you do proof of authentication? It's a big challenge for all the people. And that proof of ownership via having that authenticated product for them to trade it again. So I have a view on that. I'd wonder what you think about that.
I think what is more important here, I think, although the digital world accelerates business, it still needs regulatory compliance. And this regulatory compliance today in UAE is being done by the IFC, the MCC, and ADGM as examples. Without this regulation, what you have is the Far West, and the Far West is not good because it gives the capability of a lot of scams to take place, and not good for the business. It gives a bad name to the business. The same thing has happened in other countries in the region. For example, in Bahrain, as far back as 3 years ago, we have something called the regulatory sandbox, established by the Central Bank of Bahrain, under which several digital exchanges have been operating, and some of them have graduated. That really means that today you can do digital business and tie it with the traditional banking business. So that means when you sell a digital asset or a digital token, it will show up the next day in your traditional bank account. So overnight, we cannot just trash society. We have to evolve society with the regulatory and compliance that matches. One of the biggest changes that I think is coming as well is the usage of this technology in Islamic compliance. There's a good friend of mine by the name of Abdullah Han, which is Chinese. It was one of the first guys that created about 3 years ago something called Halal Coin, which was part and established behind the airport, the free zone Dafsa. He was a pioneer, maybe too much ahead of his time. Since then, there has been about 4 or 5 similar Islamic compliant digital assets. I think Islamic compliant digital assets are going to be also a critical game changer for the industry. And why is it important? Because Islamic finance has its own rules. These rules, it must be built on physical assets. Let me give you an example. In traditional finance, I can go with my credit card and I pay a vacation and then I pay it back over whatever. So it's not a physical asset. This is not allowed in Islamic finance. And Islamic finance means there has to be a physical asset or some value or some co-op relationship between the people that is providing the funds and the people that are actually using the funds, so that the share of the profits actually can be done at the end of the transaction. I've bought, for example, a house, and it is done through Sharia compliant finance. It's more like the traditional, sometimes in Canada we used to have called co-op banks. So everybody is part ownership in that relationship. So that means it's more trustworthy across all the members. The same thing is now happening in this digital assets. So now we're going to have DeFi-based, Islamic compliant digital assets, and so on. I see this one of the biggest changes that is obviously coming to the region as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm involved in a couple of Islamic coins as well, and compliance and being Sharia compliant coin where there is no interest, and in DeFi there is an element of interest for loans, it's not compliant. I have an issue of finding who actually does proper auditing to say this is Sharia compliance, because there is always ways in a centralized way where someone is taking the money, and that's why I said this is the nasty side of the business. So to try and make it as giving, there is always charity in Sharia compliance stuff, and I'm advising them, look, where is the 10% back to communities for the poor in the UAE region or whatever Islamic region that you choose?
You mean zakat?
Sorry?
Zakat.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, gives away the name of the coin, but or the blockchain. But in that one, and we are saying we need that zakat. You need that giving, and then no interest. So none of this yield farming stuff that we know in the DeFi space should be in there. And then where's the ownership? You know, you get the investors coming in, putting money, and then it goes to various projects, for want of better words, for the coin to do whatever. It could be building a smart city or a social community where people can live, from the less affluent people, or job creation things. They should have ownership of these things. So who legislates and does that? And that's the nasty side of our business, because there is, I guess, early days. We don't have in the space to say this is audited, this is, you know, good old Robert's PwC type of people who do auditing of such organizations. They're not established yet. And that's why we will see a lot of fakes and we'll see a lot of scams. So people need to be worried about it. That's the only health warning I give to people. Before you get involved in some of these, do study it really well. Not only the people and the team, which is always important, but I always say start with them and see what their values are before you get involved in on the investing side of things. But look at the authenticity of what you're buying. Get it verified somewhere, someplace, okay? Let's move it, George, to, again, coming back to decentralized. So there is a lot of talk about Web 3.0, and when we started the internet thing with .com, I remember we saying the internet will change only when you get the money to it, okay? We now have the money to it, the crypto, and we have the internet. So now I see that full vision going forward where the money, the internet, and Web 3.0, so I see a big disruption on AWS, Microsoft Cloud. By the way, I'm not a fan of these guys because it's A, too very expensive. B, we have all these devices doing 80% of the time hardly anything, laptops, all over PCs, laptops at home doing nothing. I see the money going there. So we can opt to say, I want my processor and I want my memory shared, or I want my storage shared. And we had this with virtualization and VMware 20 odd years ago, where we can all be earning money. Now imagine places, again, Africa, India, people just have that, and just by owning it, they'll earn $1, $2 and eat. So why do you have cloud computing? So once transaction throughput and all this goes forward, I see that's where the world is gonna go. People will earn money by just owning a phone. And with quantum computing, nanochips, and all of this, it will be possible. And I think it'll be in this side of 5 years.
Actually, I would like to add maybe something a little bit different here. Although I'm a technologist, I have this problem with technology, and this includes blockchain. It is not very usable, and it's not very friendly. So although there is the things that you mentioned, like blockchain, trust, exchange of value, Web 3.0, no, I believe the key aspect as we move forward is when we build usable applications to the user. What do I mean? The day you see a blockchain application and you do not know that it is blockchain, this is going to be the most successful application. Because the users are not technologists, so they want to use an application that is friendly towards them. Users change very slowly. Let me give you an example from Canada. In Canada, about 40 years ago, they introduced something called ATM machines. Canada had an aging population. Before ATM machines, what people used to do when they go to the banks, they used to have a little booklet, and they used to have a dot matrix printer go bzz, 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 that put the balance.
I remember those passbook printers.
So guess what was the big challenge when they introduced the ATM machine? The users did not trust the ATM machine. But the banks forced the users to go do the operations at the ATM. But guess what was happening? The older population was going to the ATM, doing the usage and the application, then they ran back into the bank to update their little booklet, just to make sure that the transaction was successful. That really means that as we move forward, we need to have applications that are not just trustworthy, that are friendly enough that the users feel comfortable using them. The innovators out there that create these applications are the next Bill Gates, the next innovators.
No, absolutely correct. I remember at Nixdorf, at Siemens Nixdorf, when I was there in the early 80s, we did the ATMs and trying to get the kind of co-op banks. In UK, we call them building societies. And I remember going to Anglia Building Society, which then got bought by Nationwide, and then became Nationwide Anglia, and doing the virtual no barriers type of a branch where even the cashiers had an ATM coming from here and the money popping out to give it to them. So if someone came with a gun and said, give me your money, it's over here, time safe. And also after every few minutes, we used to call it the suction job, where the money was collected from here, put in air tubes, going in the back in a time safe place. So easy to do rather than doing all of this. And that's why the example I gave, when the average person in Africa, India, China, wherever, can just by owning a phone, earn money on blockchain. All they have to say is, yes, I want to share my memory or processing or my this in a sandbox area, and they are earning money. Simple 3-button thing. So user interface, I think, is the point you were making. UI, UX, just now, whilst it's getting better compared to 3 years ago, it's still not there. So when it's 2-3 button like this, and I think Robert also mentioned eToro. Whilst I'm not a big fan of eToro, even though I'm an account holder there, I hate them because of their fees. Very huge fees, correct, Robert? Well done. So very huge fees. However, their UI, UX is phenomenal. And that's why they're a multi-billion-dollar organization already in this short space of time. So when it's simple, just like using a mobile, that's when we are going to make a difference. And I think it'll happen within 5 years. We have a few seconds left. One final statement.
Actually, I would like to leave you always with simple ways. I'm a mathematician, so I like to look at things as simple equations or sometimes simple acronyms. Many of you have heard of something called MBC, which is actually the famous TV station from Saudi Arabia. I believe that in the future, as we move forward, any kind of good business needs three ingredients to be successful, whether it uses any technology, blockchain, or others. And the MBC really stands for 3 things: money, brains, and contacts. Money is the finance that helps your business grow and scale up. Brains is the idea, the technology like blockchain, etc. And the last element is the contacts. And that's why you're here today. You're here to establish face-to-face relationship with people so you can have a proper ecosystem. Because in today's business, you don't do everything or 100% of the solution by yourself. Elements of your solution will come from some of your partners. So I think these 3 elements allow you to move forward in a much faster way and in a much more successful way by creating like a 3-legged stool that stands on itself.
Okay, thank you. We have very short time. Any questions, put your hand. Where's the microphone, Pushkin? There's a microphone. Anyone would like to ask a question there? Or shall I do the final close? Let's have one question. Who's going to be shy? Who's going to be bold? Leila, you always smile. You always have a question. Go for it.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here with you in this beautiful event. And blockchain in Dubai, it's become a landmark now because of people like you. When I attend always blockchain, I see the future in the technology, and we're driving us to know more, to ask more. But today you highlight all things because we are with the King George on blockchain and with yourself, Your Excellency, of course. What I say, until now, even this market is be worldwide, why until now we don't have proper license for this technology or this trade, which is open facilities in single minute to do a lot of transactions? And I know that blockchain also is in humanity. They are doing a lot of charity work, directly and indirectly. So how it will be as a traders, our future with blockchain? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So two things. One is the humanitarian side, and one is how the regulations are not there as solid. Let me go back to regulations first, okay? And I'll do the humanity. Even when .com started, I remember with the open source, we had this thing called Star Office. We then put it into an open source thing called Open Office. And this was the whole platform that you see now that Google Docs and all these people are using, and even Open Office is out there now. I remember trying to talk to, again, those few techno owners like the Microsofts, because when 99% of the world was using Microsoft, where are the standards, where are the regs for them to even open up? In those days, it wasn't APIs, it was XML, interchanging of information. There was no XML, and they wouldn't give you even their XML interfaces to do a control bold or underline or some calculation on a spreadsheet or the fonts, etc. So the technology providers have to provide that, to create that in some form of standard and regulate it, that every time they do an upgrade or whatever, it will open it to the industry to talk to and do that. So that all comes to regulations and standards. It took 20 years, and it's only when they lost against me in UK quite a few times, we forced the government to say, monopolies don't work. The government has a role to play. Now, so taking the same thing, in blockchain space, there are regulations, however, there's not enough, okay? So there are regulations on doing exchanges for trading, what you asked. So there are quite a few countries, Gibraltar's, Malta's, all these guys started in the early days, the Estonia's, Switzerland's, Singapore's, Hong Kong, I hate to name many more. And we've been trying to do it over here as well for the last 4 or 5 years, but ADGM has now started doing parts of those regs, and so has DIFC and DMCC. It's not enough, in my view, because at the end of the day, you can say you're a blockchain country, but we don't have banking provided for these people, so the banking has to be done elsewhere. Okay, so that's the standard side. Will it happen? I see it happening because there's a lot of us now putting pressure in the local authorities to try and get these regs passed so that, the UAE can be a major force in the world. On the humanitarian side, you've heard me already said we're doing 5%, but a lot of the blockchain people are community-based, in my view, and we like to give for charity. We all do that, and there's always an element of giving, okay? So we do give. Are we giving enough? No. Why is that? Because I think there's a lot of, sorry to say it, greedy younger people who are getting into this and seeing money coming very fast, and they are not sharing and giving forward. As I said, my mission is 1 billion lives. So we need more people like that doing that. So it needs people like you, Leila, to go out and beat all the other people around, but not over here.
I have another highlight. In the goal of sustainable development, the UN is also encouraging the youth empowerment, the women empowerment, and all those sustainable SMEs, micro SMEs, and so. But we giving the knowledge to the people, and we doing in university, for example, economy, science, astronomy. Every sector has some university and specialized to teach the people. I know blockchain teaching the people, and George is going every time flying to do those conferences and give us the knowledge about blockchain. Are we thinking in the future it will be some university teaching the people blockchain and teaching especially the people who's trading.
Yes.
Some people like I do try to trade and go to that technology or cryptocurrency or those, everybody coming with some token for himself. But we still not having the proper knowledge what it mean. People are still confusing with the blockchain. I'm sorry to say that, because there is a lot of scammer, like you say, and everybody coming with some technology, portfolio, and transfer transactions, and they say, for 1 year, we're gonna give you the return back. And some highlight, it's like people there thinking about earning easy, faster the money, and
fully agree.
that point, you have to clarify it, because or you build the trust 100%, or people are gonna get scared from this technology, even it's the future, even it's the most solid and easy way with the banker. And now we've seen a lot of digitalization on the banking and a lot of scam too. How are you gonna find a solution on this as a leader of blockchain? Thank you.
No, you absolutely bang on, and that's why I brought it up today as well. In terms of education, it needs, I mean, you know, as George said, the two of us, we talk, we give 10% of our time educating people online, offline, as much as we can on the alarms and the red flags and things like that. In terms of universities and things like that, as far as I see, there are so many universities now doing these sorts of courses. There's lots of online universities and online courses. And there's countless numbers of books out there now. So those who want to learn and protect themselves, you should take the time. Don't dive into it. It's like any business. Take it like a business, you know, before you put your money in it, to explore things around it. Just don't go it because someone who is, sorry to say it, a friend advised you to do it. I would not take that sort of advice, and that's the advice I give to people, that you know, just because a friend has come to you and said, this is good and it's going to go 10x, 20x, don't believe, rubbish like that. And do your own due diligence. And if you don't understand it, always ask an independent. George, would you like to add to that?
In terms of universities, there's several that have done extremely good work. One is the Open University, and the other one is Singularity in California. More closer to here, the leaders have been the University of Nicosia, which was the first one to actually have a bachelor and a master degree, both in digital currencies as well as blockchain. Some local universities have also established a relationship with them so they can advance the program. But your point is correct. Educational and awareness, and when I mean awareness is end user, not just university, is one key element to avoid all the problems that we're having with the scams. We cannot solve everything by regulation alone, because regulation moves too slow. When you give awareness to the average user, then things move much faster. And that really means by distributing up-to-date information in non-technology terms to the users of blockchain every day.
Yeah, thank you. I find these more useful for the audience. So if you want, this is the way you can get maximum value. Any other question? We'll take another one. Anybody else? Move on. Oh, there you go. Imran, where's the microphone? The microphone. Over there. Keep it green.
Of course. I'm Imran from Save Planet Earth Token. And I just want to discuss about the environmental impact of blockchains. We are actually planting trees around the world, and we've contracted about 101 million trees so far. And I just want to discuss regarding a green blockchain, whether there is something that exists out there at the moment, because we will be minting these, or asset tokenization, and I don't want to call it NFTs as well. So we'll be minting the carbon credits which we have generated and verified onto the blockchain. So I was wondering if there's a green blockchain at the moment?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We'll both answer it from our perspective. Let me take that quickly. So I am involved also in a couple like that, where it's not only the green from the planting for the carbon side of things, but also where the energy, because one of the biggest criticism, people think blockchain and crypto is very expensive on electricity because they look at it just from the Bitcoin perspective. But there are various solar types of farms with the mining farms attached to it, so the energy is clean, and they also do the green side of it with carbon, with plants and trees and all that as well. So there are quite a few out there. We could have a word with you later. George?
I think there's 3 or 4 elements to answer that question. The first one is with Bitcoin itself. So there is a movement today in Bitcoin to make it more greener, since it's the one that consumes the most energy because it has 75% of the value. So people are using today up to 50, or it's actually 47% renewable energy. That really means solar, hydroelectric, also solar flare by using natural gas closer. This only addresses part of the problem. The second one is by having alternate consensus mechanisms. Why does blockchain in Bitcoin uses so much energy? Because it's based on something called proof of work. Today we have over 100 other alternate consensus mechanisms. Proof of stake, which is the migration happening in Ethereum, is going to consume 1,000% less energy. This is only from the blockchain perspective. The last part of the question answer has to do with doing sustainability goals and green, etc. So there's a whole series of coins. There's about 10 of them that are addressing carbon credit funds. So that really means institutionalizing good green behavior in business. So the business that pollutes can purchase the carbon credits, and the ones that invest in carbon reduction get that fund. So basically the money is being transferred from the polluters to the ones that actually remove the pollution. One example of a colleague that has established a complete life cycle on this, he's going to be here in October, is a gentleman by the name of Michael Turpin, which is a very good colleague also, and he has done more than 100 fundraising as well. This is just the 3 elements that I consider extremely important to that. The last one is along the same size or the same as the carbon credits. There is also a big movement to purchase sections of the Amazon forest and not allow it to be converted to, for example, things like soybean and other kinds of agriculture that destroys. So it's kind of to try to preserve the lungs of the planet. Most of you should know that something like close to 30% of the Amazon forest has been deforested, which is actually contributing substantially to the problems that we see today, like change in thermal issues, like climate change, I guess. I'm not too much technical in that area, but maybe my terms are not perfect, so thank you.
No problem. Yeah, climate change is a huge thing, so we can talk about that as well. But let's wrap up. We've got Alexandra on next, so thank you, George. It was great, as always, to chat with you. All